The first time Blackmoor called my name, it used my mother's voice. She had been dead 11 years by then. Still, I heard her clear as church bells through the stone walls beside my bunk, whispering, "Marcus, baby, open the door." I almost did. That's the part I don't like telling. Not Pike vanishing, not Baptiste coming back from the mercy wing with all that white in his beard, not the guards with no shadows walking count after midnight. The part I don't like telling is that for 1 second, after all the blood I had put into this world, after all the men I had ordered into the ground, after all the years I spent making people afraid of my name, I was still somebody's child. And Blackmoor knew it. That place knew everything. People used to ask me what reformed me. They expected a clean answer. Age, God, regret, a good book, a good man behind bars who showed me a better road. It wasn't any of those things. Not at first. What reformed me was Blackmoor Penitentiary. And I don't know if that word belongs to a prison. A prison holds men. Blackmoor held something else. I was not young when they sent me there. That matters. A young man can say he didn't know how far the road went. He can say ain't nobody taught him the difference between fear and respect. I had no such excuse. I was old enough to know better and mean enough to not care. By then my name had weight. Marcus Kane did not need to raise his voice in most rooms. Men knew what came behind it. I'd been a stick-up kid, then a collector, then a man who sent collectors. I'd watched boys become men, and men become pictures on funeral cards. That was the life I built, not fell into. Built, brick by brick, order by order, name by name. And because I didn't always pull the trigger myself, I told myself I was different from the ones who did. I told myself giving the word was cleaner than doing the work. Blackmoor corrected me on that, and it didn't correct me gently. I came in with 2 men, Darnell Pike and Leon Baptiste. Pike was always in a suit of skin, younger than me by about 20 years, all teeth and shoulders, always grinning like trouble owed him money. He had more nerve than wisdom, and back then I mistook that for a promise. Pike wanted to be known, wanted a name that walked ahead of him the way mine did. Baptiste was the opposite. He didn't waste words. He had hands like hammers and eyes that never stopped counting exits. Pike was the mouth. Baptiste was the hand. I was the word. And how we came into Blackmoor. 3 men in chains on a prison bus, riding through the rain thick enough to turn the windows gray. The bus climbed for a long time. I remember that. Blackmoor sat above the road on a hill of black stone and dead grass, all towers and narrow windows, like somebody had carved a church out of a cliff and then decided God didn't need it anymore. Most prisons announce themselves before you enter. You hear shouting. You hear metal scraping. You hear men making animal sounds through bars just to remind the world they still have lungs. Blackmoor didn't make a sound. No inmates at the fence. No faces at the windows. No hands waving from the yard. Just rain sliding down the walls and a bell somewhere inside, slow and deep. Pike leaned across the aisle, chains clinking at his wrists. "This is it?" he said. "This is the joint everyone's whispering about?" Nobody answered. Baptiste looked out the window at the walls. Looking back, I should have been watching him. He saw something in that place before I did. Not the ghosts, not yet. Just the shape of it. The way the tower stood. The way the guards at the gate kept looking over their shoulders. Not at us, but at the prison behind them. A man who knows traps starts to feel them before he sees the teeth. The bus rolled through the first gate, then the second. The door shut behind us with the kind of sound that takes something out of your chest. Inside, the intake room smelled of wet wool, lye soap, old paper, and men trying not to sweat. The guards processed us without much talk. This was the first strange thing. I'd been handled by guards before. County men, city men, federal men. Men who like to make a speech. Men who like to lean close and call you by your number like they had discovered a new way to own you. Blackmoor's guards were different. They didn't swagger. They didn't smile. They didn't waste cruelty. They moved like men working around a sleeping dog. The first one to speak had a long face, and his eyes were sunk deep in his skull. His nameplate said Harlan. He'd read from a card like he had read it 1,000 times and still did not trust himself enough to remember every word. You eat when the bell says. You work when the bell says. You return to your cell when ordered. No talking after second bell. No answering voices from outside your assigned cell after lock-in. No approaching the east corridor without escort. No entering Mercy Wing unless sentenced by the warden. Pike snorted. "Mercy Wing," he said. "Is that what you call the hole?" Harlan looked at him. Not angry. Not even annoyed. Just tired. "You call it what you like until you go there," he said. "And after that, most men don't call it anything." Pike looked at me and grinned. I gave him nothing. Harlan continued. "If a guard gives instruction, obey it. If a guard gives instructions after the second bell and you can't see his face, don't obey it. If you hear your full name spoken from the walls, report it at morning count. Don't report it at night." I laughed then, not loud, just enough. Harlan looked at me. "You find that funny, Kane?" "Sounds like you boys run a ghost tour," I said. For the first time, his face changed. Not much, just a tightening around the mouth. "You boys were big medicine wherever you come from," he said. "But that don't buy you nothing from here." "Everything buys something," I said. "No," Harlan said. "Not here." They cut our hair, gave us numbers, gave us uniforms that smelled like they had been washed with rocks outside. They marched us through the first block, rows of cells, faces behind bars, old men, young men, big men, thin men, white hair, black eyes, tattooed hands, broken noses. Men who, anywhere else, would have been testing us the second we came through the door. Nobody said a word. No whistles, no threats, no questions about where we're from or what we did. Just eyes. Not hard eyes. Not soft ones either. Measuring eyes. Morning eyes. Like we were already in the ground and had not caught up to ourselves yet. Pike noticed it too. He rolled his shoulders and looked around like he had stepped into a room full of sick dogs. "Damn," he said under his breath. "Whole block gone yellow." That's what I thought too. I'm ashamed of that now, but it's the truth. I looked at those men sitting quiet in their cells, hands folded, backs straight, feet away from the doors, and I thought Blackmoor had bled the sand out of them. I thought they had been broken so deep and forgot how men were supposed to move. No one made book. No one traded cigarettes. No one leaned on the weak ones. No one had to hustle. Blackmoor had none of that. Not because the men were better, because they had learned what attention cost them. And I didn't know that yet. At chow, they sat us at a long table near the middle of the hall. The mess hall was a stone room with high windows and ceilings that lost its shadow. Rain tapped the glass. Trays moved along steel rails, and men ate with their heads down and their shoulders tight. Nobody talked unless spoken to, and even then they kept it low. Pike looked disgusted. He picked up his spoon and looked at the gray stew on his tray and pushed it away. "Look at this," he said. "Look at this," he said. "They feeding us dishwater and everybody's just taking it." Nobody answered. That made him grin. He looked down the table at the heavy-set man with cauliflower ears and prism blue eyes. "You hear me, big man?" The man kept eating. Pike leaned forward. "I said they feeding us dishwater." The man's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. Every fork near us stopped with it. Not all at once, one by one. Then the guards by the wall stopped moving. Pike smiled wider, thinking he had the room. "Ain't one of you mugs got any sand?" The whole mess hall went still. Not quiet, still. There's a difference. Quiet is the absence of sound. Still is when even breath gets careful. Baptiste's eyes moved to the ceiling. I saw that, but I ignored it. An old man across from me lowered his spoon onto his tray. He had a narrow face, white stubble, and hands twisted by age. His number was stitched crooked on his shirt. He didn't look like much, not until you noticed everybody near him watched from the corner of their eyes. "Sit down," he said. Pike laughed. "I am sitting." "Then eat." Pike turned to me as if he couldn't believe the old man had spoken. "You hear this, Kane? Old head giving us orders?" I looked at the old man. "What's your name?" He said, "Booker." "Booker what?" He shook his head. "First names are enough in here." Pike laughed again. "Scared of your own name?" Booker looked at him. "Name's Carey." I smiled. That sounded like fear to me. I had spent my life making my name Carey. "That's right," I said. Booker held my eyes. "You got a loud name, Kane." "Loud enough." "Loud names don't last here." Pike slapped the table once, hard. The sound cracked across the wall. Every face turned upwards, not toward Pike, upward. The guards did it too. That should have told me something. Somewhere deep inside the prison, behind the stone or under the stone or maybe inside the stone itself, something knocked. Once. Not loud. Not a bang. A knock. Like knuckles on the inside of a coffin. Pike's smile faded. Nobody moved. Rain tapped the windows. Booker closed his eyes. Then the bell rang. One slow note. The men rose from their benches in perfect order, trays in hand, eyes down, and they began filing out. No guard shouted. No one needed to. Booker passed me on his way to the tray return and spoke low enough that only I could hear. "Jam gets spread," he said. I watched him go. I hated him a little for that line, mostly because I didn't understand it. My first cellmate was a man named Ellis. Small, nervous, with his hair gone thin at the crown. He'd been in Blackmoor 9 years, and looked like he spent every one of them days holding his breath. When I slipped into the cell, he was sitting on the lower bunk with his hands on his knees. I looked at him. "You sleep up top." He moved immediately. Not with anger, not with resentment, just obedience. That confirmed everything I thought. "This whole joint full of cream puffs?" I asked. Ellis climbed up to the top bunk and sat there facing the wall. "You want advice?" he asked. "No." "I'll give it anyway." I sat on the lower bunk. Ellis spoke without turning. "Do not sleep with your feet toward the door. Don't leave your hands dangling off the bunk. If you hear a woman crying, don't ask who it is. If you hear a child laughing, cover your ears. And if a guard with black buttons comes to the count, keep your eyes on the floor. And if someone calls your name after second bell, don't answer, even if it sounds like someone you love." I stared at him. "You rehearse that?" "We all do." I asked him why. He said so the new ones might live long enough to stop laughing. I leaned back against the wall. "You scared of ghosts, Ellis?" He turned, and his face was plain, but his eyes were not. "No," he said. "Ghosts are easy. Ghosts just want you to know that they died." "What does Blackmoor want?" Ellis looked toward the cell door. Lights in the corridor hummed. "It wants you to know why." That night I lay awake under a thin blanket while prison settled around me. Blackmoor did not sleep the way other prisons did. Other prisons breathed in shouts and coughs and curses. Men talking in dreams, pipes knocking, guards laughing somewhere far away, radios low in offices, somebody crying where he thought no one could hear. Blackmoor had none of that. After the second bell, silence dropped through the place so hard it felt like it was locked in with us. I listened to Ellis breathing above me, slow, measured, like he was pretending to sleep for something might check. Sometime near the middle of the night, boots came down the tier. Slow boots, wet boots. Step, step, step. I opened my eyes. A guard passed the bars. He wore the old style uniforms. Dark jacket, high collar, cap low over his eyes. Buttons were black as beetles. His face was turned away. I watched him pass. No shadow followed him. At the time, I told myself the lights were bad. Old prison, bad wiring, tired eyes. A man can explain almost anything when his pride depends on it. The boot stopped outside my cell. I kept my eyes on the ceiling. The guard didn't speak, but the air changed. And that's the only way I can say it. It got colder, yes, but cold's just a word. This was older than cold. The kind of chill stone keeps after it's been underground for 100 years. Then Ellis whispered from the top bunk. Eyes down. I didn't move. I was Marcus Kane. I had stood in the rooms with shotguns under tables. I had sat across from men who smiled while deciding whether to kill me. I had watched police turn over mattresses while my heart beat slow as a clock. I was not lowering my eyes for a guard with bad lighting. The food slot opened. A smell came through. Wet wool, mold, old dirt, and underneath it was something sweet and rotten. The guard whispered, Marcus Elijah Kane. I didn't know how he knew my middle name. Nobody used it. My mother had used it when she was angry or afraid. My daughter had seen it on paper once and laughed because she said Elijah sounded too soft for me. I hadn't heard it in years. Ellis breathed above me fast and shallow. The guard whispered again. Marcus Elijah Kane. My mouth opened. I didn't know what I meant to say. Maybe yeah. Maybe what? Maybe nothing at all. Ellis dropped from the top bunk and hit the floor hard, landing on his knees between me and the door. He pressed both of his hands over his mouth and shook his head at me. His eyes were wide enough to show white all around. The food slot closed. The boots moved on. By morning, I had decided Ellis had set the whole thing up somehow. That's how stubborn I was. At breakfast, Pike looked tired. There were dark half-moons under his eyes, and he kept digging one finger into his ear like water was trapped there. You hear that last night, he asked. Hear what? He glanced up at Baptiste and then away. Nothing. Baptiste stood beside us in line, tray in hand. He had not touched his food. You heard something, I said. Baptiste looked at the old east corridor in the far end of the hall. A chain was pulled across it. No guard stood there. No sign warned men away. It didn't need one. Every prisoner gave that corridor extra space without being told to. I heard roll call, Baptiste said. Pike forced a laugh. At night? Inside the wall? Pike looked at me wanting to laugh too. I did. That was another mistake. Old stones make noise, I said. This place is getting in your heads already. Baptiste looked at me for a long second. Then he nodded. Yeah, he said. Maybe. But he didn't mean it. Blackmoor kept busy. Blackmoor kept men busy the old-fashioned way. Laundry, kitchen, boiler room, chapel cleaning, repairs. There was no yard time the way other places had it. No corners where men gathered to do business. You left your cell to eat, you left your cell to work, and you went back behind the door. Bell, meal, work. Bell, meal, cell. Second bell, silence. That was the shape of life. Men didn't complain. I think that's what angered me the most. I could understand fear. I could understand weakness. I could understand men choosing their spots. But the obedience in Blackmoor felt religious. It felt like I had no respect for it then. And Pike had less. At laundry, he found a big man folding sheets and slapped a stack out of his hands. The sheets spread across the wet floor. Nobody moved. The big man looked at the sheets and then Pike and then at the ceiling. Pike stepped closer, picked them up. The guard on laundry duty crossed the room fast. Not to save the big man, to save Pike. Back in line, he said. Or what, screw? The guard's face went pale. Not with anger, with fear. He looked toward the narrow service hall behind the washing machines. The lights were off. Back in line, the guard said again, softer now. Pike laughed. You scared me of that hallway. All the washing machines stopped. All of them at once. Steam drifted toward us. From the dark service hall came the sound of someone dragging a key ring across the wall. Slow. Metal teeth kissing stone. Pike turned toward it. The grin left his face. A voice from the dark said, "Darn out, Pike." The guard shut his eyes. Baptiste stepped forward. "Pike," he said, "leave it." Pike swallowed. Because he was Pike, because the room was watching him, and his pride had no place to hide. He shouted into the dark, "Come get me then." Nothing answered. And that was worse. The machine started again. The guard grabbed Pike by the sleeve and pulled him so hard Pike almost stumbled. "You damn fool." Pike ripped his arm free. But he didn't go toward the dark hall. Not then. After that, things began to gather around him. Well, that's how it felt anyway. Not happen. Gather. At chow, nobody sat close to him. During work, nobody handed him tools directly. Men avoided saying his name. That made him louder. Loud men think silence is a stage. Pike thought Blackmoor had given him room to perform in. It gave him a rope. 3 nights after the laundry room, he woke the block screaming. I heard it through 2 tiers of stone. Not words at first, just animal noises. Then his voice cracked through. Stop saying it. Stop saying it. Men stayed in their cells. No one called for a guard. And no guard came. Pike screamed until his voice went raw. In the morning, he sat across from me at breakfast with blood dried under one ear. What happened? I asked. He stared at his tray. Nothing. Don't lie to me. His eyes lifted. For 1 second, I saw the boy under all that mouth. The one I had pretended was a soldier because it served me. It was call and roll, he said. Who? He shook his head. It knew everybody. Baptiste sat down beside him. What did it say? Pike looked at him. It called men who ain't here. The mess hall seemed to lean closer. Pike's voice dropped. It called dead men. Men from home. Men I. He stopped. I knew what he meant. Men he had hurt. Men he had put away. Men he had helped me put away. He rubbed his hands over his face. Then it called me. I should have listened. Instead, I said, you're letting this joint turn you soft. Pike's face hardened. Grateful for anger, because anger was easier than fear. Soft? You heard me. He leaned across the table. I ain't soft. Then act like it. Baptiste looked at me. Not with judgment yet. That came later. This was only disappointment. Boss, he said quietly. Maybe soft ain't the word for a man hearing dead people in the walls. I turned on him. What word you got? Baptiste held my eyes. Trouble. That afternoon I asked Booker who ran Blackmoor. We were in the chapel scraping wax from the floor. The chapel was small and cold with long windows too high to see out of. There was a cross on the wall, dark wood, old enough that the face of Christ had been worn smooth. Booker worked slow. His hands shook, but not from fear. Age had him by the fingers. Somebody runs everything, I said. Booker didn't look up. That's what men say before they find something that does not need permission. The warden signs papers. The guards keep schedule. The old ones, he paused. The old ones remember. You mean ghosts? I mean old ones. I laughed. Booker kept scraping. Every man in here got the same ghost story, I said. You, Ellis, the guards, you all get together and rehearse? The story changes, Booker said. The rules don't. What rules? He looked at me then. Do not make the prison notice you. Don't answer what calls from the walls. Don't go to the east unless dragged. And do not lie in the mercy wing. And if I do? Booker's eyes moved to the cross. Then you meet yourself. Was that supposed to scare me? No, he said. Meeting yourself is what scares men who know themselves the least. I stood. The shit sounds like a bedtime story for men with no sand. Booker sighed. Blackmoor has a high number of men that take themselves at account, he said. Outside folks blame the isolation, the food, the age of the place, hard sentencing, bad nerves. That's what weak men do. The words come out easy. Too easy. Booker turned his old face toward me. That's the ugliest thought a living man can have about the dead. I said nothing. He went back to the floor. Some men meet themselves in here, Kane. Some would rather meet the devil. That line stayed with me. I pretended that it didn't. Pike disappeared 9 nights later. There was no blood, no fight, no broken lock. That was the part that made men whisper behind their teeth. The night before, he had been worse than usual. Pale, sweating, jumping at every sound. He kept asking Baptiste if he heard a woman humming. Baptiste said no. Pike called him a liar. At second bell, the lights dimmed. The block went still. I was in my cell with Ellis sitting on the lower bunk listening to the rain and the gutters. Then Pike laughed. It came from somewhere down the tier. Not his normal laugh. Too thin. Too high. Like somebody had taught his mouth the sound but not the reason. A guard shouted quiet after second bell. That alone was strange. The guards didn't shout after second bell. Pike laughed again. Then he said it loud and clear. "Yeah, I'm here." Ellis covered his face. I stood and went to the bars. Down the tier, every prisoner who could see Pike's cell had turned away from it. Not watching. Never watching. "Pike," I called. Ellis hissed behind me. "Don't." I called again. "Pike." The lights flickered. For a half a second, the tier looked longer than it should have. Cells stretched away into the dark, far beyond the wall where the block was supposed to end. In that extra darkness, men stood behind bars that had not existed there a moment before. Hundreds of them, maybe even thousands, all facing Pike's cell, all silent. Then the light steadied. The tier was normal again. Pike whispered something. I couldn't hear it. Then something knocked from inside of his cell. Once. Twice. 3 times. Morning count found his door locked, his bunk made tight enough to bounce a quarter on it, his shoes lined up under it, but Pike was gone. On the wall above the bunk, scratched into the paint with something sharp, was one word: present. The guards didn't search long. That told me everything I needed to know. Harlan looked into the cell, read the word, and closed his eyes like a man hearing bad news he had expected. "Where is he?" I asked. Harlan didn't answer. I stepped toward him. Baptiste caught my arm. I looked down at his hand. He let go, but he didn't apologize. "Where's my man?" I said. Harlan turned to me. For the first time, I saw anger in him. Real anger. Not at me. For me, maybe. Or at the waste of all of us. "You were told not to answer the names after second bell." He was in a locked cell. "Yes," Harlan said. "That's not an answer." "No," he said. "It's not." They emptied Pike's cell by noon. No one spoke his name after that except me. I did it often at first. Then I said it because I thought silence was surrender. Pike. Pike. Darnell Pike. I said it in chow. I said it on work detail. I said it in the chapel where Booker flinched every time. Then one evening when I was washing my hands, I heard Pike say my name from the drain. Not loud, not ghostly. Just Pike. Tired, wet, far down. "Kane." I turned the water off. The bathroom was empty. "Kane." He said it again. I knelt beside the drain. I knew better. By then I knew better. But knowing better and doing better are not always the same thing. "What?" I whispered. There was a long silence. Then Pike said, "Why'd you let me talk?" I stood so fast my shoulder hit the sink. The drain gurgled. Nothing else. That's when I began to hate Blackmoor. Not fear it. Not yet. Just hate it. Fear came later when the hate ran out of room. The body is a prison too. I didn't know that then. I thought the cell was 4 walls and a locked door. That's only the first kind. The body keeps its own doors, and the memory knows every key. You can leave a place and still wake up inside it because your hands remember iron, your ears remember keys, and your chest remembers fear. Blackmoor understood that before I did. It didn't need to chain a man forever. It only needed to teach his body the tune. Baptiste changed after Pike vanished. He got quieter, which was something because Baptiste never was a loud man. But there was a quiet that holds strength, and there's a quiet that listens for footsteps. He became a second kind. He watched corners. He watched shadows. He watched guards. After Pike, Baptiste pulled me aside near the stairs. "Boss," he said, "this isn't the kind of place that you take." There it was, the first real crack. Not in him, but in us. I stepped close. "You scared?" He didn't answer quick. That angered me more than if he had said yes. I asked if you were scared. Baptiste looked toward the old east corridor. "Yeah," he said. I stared at him, and he looked back at me. "And if you had any sense left, you would be too." I should have thanked him, but instead I punished him. That's what men like I was did when the truth came from the wrong mouth. Booker had something I wanted. Knowledge. Influence. Maybe both. Men listened to him. Guards left him alone. He knew the rules and the holes around the rules. So I told Baptiste to press him. Not to hurt him. Not yet. Just remind the old man that fear could wear a human face too. Baptiste didn't want to, and I saw that. He said Booker didn't do anything. I said he knows something. He's old. He's in the way. Baptiste looked at me for a long time, and then he nodded. Because he was loyal. Because I had taught him loyalty meant obedience. Because he still thought I knew where I was leading him. That night, Booker was found at the bottom of the chapel stairs with his wrist broken and his face bruised. He didn't tell on Baptiste. He didn't have to. Blackmoor knew. The next morning, Baptiste's name was called during count. Not by Harlan. Not by any guard I knew. The guard who called it stood at the end of the tier in an old uniform with black buttons and no shadow under his feet. "Leon Baptiste," he said. Baptiste closed his eyes and stepped forward. I almost hit him. "Do not," he whispered. The old guard turned his face toward me. I still can't tell you what he looked like. I remember the cap. I remember the collar. I remember the black buttons. But the space where a face should be, that didn't make sense. But the face itself slides away from memory like water off glass. "Leon Baptiste," he said again. Baptiste walked out of his cell. No chains. No escort. The tier watched from behind bars. He paused without looking. "Leon," I said. He stopped. For a second I thought he might turn back. And then he said, "This was your word." And he kept walking. And they took him east, toward Mercy Wing. The door at the end of that corridor opened before he even touched it. Then it closed. 3 days passed and no one mentioned Baptiste. His tray didn't come. His cell stayed empty. I asked Harlan where he was. Harlan said Mercy. I asked him if men come back. He said some. I asked what happened to the rest. He said they're counted elsewhere. The next morning, Baptiste came back. He walked into the mess hall during breakfast. The whole room stopped eating. I didn't recognize him at first. His body was the same, but his beard, which had been black 3 days before, was streaked white from chin to jaw. His eyes had changed too. Not broken, but that would have been easier. They were clear, too clear. Like Mercy Wing had washed all the lies out of them and left nothing soft behind them. He took his tray and sat across from me. No one stopped him. No one spoke. I looked at his hands. His nails were worn down. There was black dirt under them. "Leon," I said. He stared at his food. "What happened?" He picked up his spoon and his hand trembled once. Only once. Then stilled. "Don't ask me that," he said. "I'm asking." His eyes lifted, and there it was. The judgment I had earned. "You never had to touch anybody," he said. My mouth went dry. "What?" "You heard me." Pike would have yelled. Baptiste didn't yell. That made it worse. "All those years," he said. "All those room, all those men. You stood clean in the corner while everybody else got dirty for you." I leaned forward. "Watch your mouth." "No," he said. The word hit harder than a punch. Baptiste had never told me no, not once. He looked at me like he spent 3 days reading a book written in my blood. "You never had to touch nobody," he said again. "That's what made it worse." I wanted to hurt him then. That's another thing I don't like telling. After all he had been through, seeing what this place had done to him, my first honest feeling was not concern. It was rage. Because he had named the lie I lived inside. The bell rang. Baptiste stood. Before he walked away, he leaned in close. "It showed me Pike," he whispered. "It showed me Booker. It showed me men I'd never met. Men you forgot." "I didn't forget anybody," I said. Baptiste's face didn't change. "That's a lie, too." He left me sitting there with my stew cooling in front of me. After Mercy Wing, Baptiste stopped following me. He didn't turn against me. That would have just been simple. He stepped out from under my shadow. He moved through Blackmoor carefully, quietly. He helped men when he could. He warned new prisoners not to answer voices. He listened when men whispered about the walls. I called it fear. Old Marcus knows better. Baptiste had begun walking men through. I was still leading them in. My turn had come because I could not let go of my own shape. A man like I was will destroy himself trying to remain the man he has already outlived. There was a new prisoner brought in 2 weeks after Baptiste's return. Young, red-faced, full of spit. He reminded me of Pike, which means I disliked him immediately. At chow, he started talking. Not just talking, performing. He was asking who had cigarettes, who had the blades, who ran the block, who we needed to see about protection. Normal questions in any normal stir. In Blackmoor, they sounded obscene. Nobody answered. He slapped the tray. Men froze. The ceiling listened. Baptiste stood from 2 tables away. "Sit down," he told the boy. The boy puffed up. "Who are you?" "Someone trying to keep you alive." I laughed. That laugh was the last piece of the old me still standing. "You hear yourself," I said to Baptiste. "You giving sermons now?" He looked at me. "Maybe somebody should." I should have let Baptiste handle it. Instead, I stepped in because pride is a stupid god and I'd worshipped it far too long. I grabbed the boy by the collar and shoved him back into the bench. The whole mess hall went silent. "Listen close," I told him. "You don't run your mouth in here unless you can pay for every word, you understand?" The boy nodded fast. For 1 second, I thought I had done a good thing. Then the knock came. One knock. Not from the walls, from under the table. Every tray jumped. The young prisoner began to cry. Not because he understood, but because the body sometimes knows what the mind hasn't learned yet. Harlan came for me after supper. He stood outside my cell with 2 guards behind him. Living guards, I think. "Kane," he said. I rose from the bunk. Ellis faced the wall. I stepped to the bars. "What now?" Harlan's face was gray. "Mercy wing." Ellis made a small sound above me. I smiled because I still had 1 mask left. About time I saw that place. Harlan did not smile. "No one sees mercy," he said. "Mercy sees you." They didn't cuff me. That scared me more than the cuffs would have. The tier watched as I walked out. Baptiste stood at his bars, and for a moment I thought he might say something. He did. Not loud, not soft, just enough. Tell the truth before it asked twice. I wanted to ask him what that meant. Harlan and the others walked me east. I had seen the outside of Blackmoor. I knew how the blocks connected. I knew where the chapel sat, where the laundry steamed under the pipes. The corridor east should have been short. It wasn't. We walked past doors with no numbers, then past doors with numbers too high for the prison. Halfway down the east corridor, I noticed a photograph hanging crooked on the wall. It was old. It was brown with age. A line of guards stood in front of Blackmoor's first gate, their uniforms stiff, their faces pale from bad film and worse lives. The brass plate beneath it read, "Blackmoor Staff, 1896. I would have kept walking if I had not seen the man standing third from the left. Long face, sunken eyes, same mouth pulled tight like it had forgotten how to smile. It was Harlan. Younger, maybe, but Harlan. I looked at the guard walking beside me. He didn't look at the photograph. "Keep walking," he said. Then we walked past doors marked with names. Some I knew. Some I had tried not to know. At first I told myself I was reading wrong. Bad light. Old paint. Nerves. The guards behind me had gone quiet. I looked back. Only Harlan stood there now. The other 2 were gone. Or maybe they had never been there. "Where are your boys?" I asked. Harlan stared ahead. "Keep walking." "Are you dead, Harlan?" Then he looked at me. For once the tiredness left his face and something like sorrow came through. "I ask myself that every morning," he said. We reached a black door at the end of the hall. A word had been carved into the stone above it. Mercy. Harlan took a key from his ring. Before he opened the door, he said, "There's still time to tell the truth." "About what?" He looked at me like a man looking down a well. "That's how it starts." The door opened. Inside was a cell, small, stone, no window, a bunk bolted to one wall, a drain in the center of the floor. The smell was not rot, exactly. It was memory gone bad. Harlan stepped aside. I walked in. The door shut behind me. No lock turned. No footsteps left. The dark didn't come all at once. The first hour I stood. The second I sat. The third I told myself nothing was happening. Men like I was don't fear hell at first. We talk about it too much. We make jokes about it. We put the devils on rings and crosses and around our necks and tell ourselves God understands business. Hell is a room where every wall had been waiting for you to run out of lies. Sometime after dark became complete, my mother began to hum. Not through the door, not from the hall, from under the drain. A song she used to hum while washing dishes. I haven't heard it in years. Then came Pike, laughing first, then crying, then asking why I let him talk. I covered my ears. That didn't do anything. Baptiste came next. Not the living Baptiste, the one Mercy Wing had showed him. He whispers names, not accusations. Names. Every man I had given away, every man I had pointed at, every man who had died because Marcus Kane said it should be so. Some I knew, some I had forgotten, some I've never even bothered to learn. That was worse. A man can defend himself against accusations. Names are harder. Names are harder. Names just stand there. At one point, light appeared under the door. I crawled toward it. I won't dress that up. I crawled. Through the crack, I saw shoes, many shoes, standing in the hall. Prison boots, dress shoes, children's shoes, women's shoes, bare feet with mud on the toes. A voice said Marcus Elijah Kane. I didn't answer. The voice became my mother. I put my forehead against the stone floor. She said, "Open the door." I almost did. Even with no handle, even with knowing better. I put my hand against the place where a handle should have been. That's when Pike whispered from behind me, "You let me talk." I turned. He stood in the corner, wet and smiling. Behind him stood Baptiste, white-bearded and silent. Behind Baptiste stood men I had known. Behind them even more. The cell was too small for all of the dead I had brought with me. But there they were anyway, filling the dark without crowding it. My mother was last. She looked the way she had looked before the sickness took the weight from her. Strong arms, tired eyes, hair tied back. She looked at me with love, and that's what broke me. Not hate, not rage, love. I could have survived accusation. I'd practiced that. But my mother looking at me like I was still her son, after everything I had done, put a crack through me I've never been able to mend. I did what I had to do, I said. The room waited. I kept order. The room waited. I never touched. The knock came before I finished. One knock, inside my chest. My heart stopped. The world narrowed into a pinhole. In that pinhole, I saw a hand reach through the door. No door opened. The hand just came through the wood as if the wood had never been asked. It was long, gray. Warden's keys just hung from the belt behind it, jingling slow. A shape outside the door where the light gave up. I can't tell you its face. Maybe it had none. Maybe it had too many. Maybe it was every guard who ever walked that hall, every warden, every judge, every father mistook fear for discipline, every man who locked another man away and called the locking mercy. The hand touched my chest with one finger. My heart began again. The first beat hurt so badly I screamed, and with that beat came the truth. Not memory, the truth. I saw Pike as he was, a loud, frightened boy wearing my shadow like a coat too big for him. I saw Baptiste loyal because I had made loyalty sacred and conscience expensive. I saw Booker at the bottom of the chapel stairs. I saw men taking themselves out of the count, not because they had no sand, but because Blackmoor had put all their lives in their hands at once and nobody stood beside them while they had tried to hold the weight. Then I saw myself. Not as a boss, not as a survivor, not as a man who did what he had to. Just a man standing far enough from the blood to pretend his shoes were clean. That was the lie. That had always been the lie. I don't know how long I stayed in Mercy Wing. Men told me later it was 2 nights. Ellis said 3. Harlan said nothing. Time don't walk straight in that hall. My door opened. Harlan stood in the doorway. Behind him, the corridor was empty. "Can you stand?" he said. I could. Barely. As I passed him, he didn't look at me. I understood that then. Harlan had seen men leave that cell, and he had seen men fail to leave it. He just didn't know which one was worse. Back on the block, nobody cheered. Nobody asked. Men looked once and then looked away. That was respect in Blackmoor. Baptiste stood at his bars and our eyes met. For the first time I had known him, I had no order to give. He nodded once, but not forgiveness. It was recognition. I was not a good man after Mercy Wing. Don't make that mistake. A night in the dark does not wash a life clean. I still had anger inside of me, but it was quieter. Not the old quiet. Before, my quiet had been a threat. After Mercy, my quiet was a wound I was trying not to pass on. When new men came in, I didn't laugh. When they asked who ran the block, I told them. The bell. Some listened. Most did not. That's the grief of warning men. You can hand a man a map and still watch him walk toward the hole because he thinks the map is fear. Booker died that winter. Old age, the guard said. Maybe. Blackmoor had many ways to write one thing and mean another. When they carried him out, I stood at his door. His Bible was at the floor beside the bunk. A page had been marked with a strip torn from an old uniform. Genesis. Kane. Am I my brother's keeper? I knew the verse. Everybody did, even men who pretend they didn't. But I had never felt it look back at me before. After Booker, I stopped asking if Blackmoor was haunted. That question had started to feel too small. A haunted place means ghosts belong to the place. Blackmoor was worse than that. The only ghosts in Blackmoor were the ones that men brought with them. The prison just gave them somewhere to walk. I was paroled from Blackmoor before my sentence would even allow it. That's another thing I can't explain. One morning, Harlan came to my cell with papers. "Time served," he said. I laughed because I thought he was making a joke. He didn't laugh with me. The paper had my name, my number, and the warden's stamp. Blackmoor Penitentiary. Time served. I said, "Served according to who?" Harlan looked down the tier. The lights hummed. Somewhere far off, a bell rang once. "I do not ask questions about release," he said. "But about Baptiste?" Harlan's face didn't change. "Not today." I turned to Baptiste and he stood at the bars, older than he had any right to be. I said, "Leon?" He shook his head once. Not angry, just final. "You gotta carry what you have to, and I gotta carry mine." "What am I supposed to do with it?" He looked at me, and then for a moment I saw the man who had walked in beside me. The hand, the soldier, the brother I had not known how to keep. "Walk somebody else through," he said. Those were the last words Leon Baptiste ever spoke to me. I don't know what happened to him. I looked. Believe me or don't, but I've looked. No release record, no death notice, no transfer paper that I could find. Just a name that stopped appearing where names should appear. Maybe Blackmoor took him. Maybe he took himself out of the count. Maybe he lived long enough to become something I wouldn't even recognize. I pray for the third. But I've learned that prayers are not receipts. On my last morning, they dressed me in the clothes I had worn coming in. They hung loose. I had lost weight in Blackmoor. More than weight. The front gate opened. Rain fell the same as the day I arrived. No inmates watched from the windows. No one shouted goodbye. Harlan walked me to the last door, and before I opened it, I asked him, "Was it real?" He didn't ask what I meant. That was answer enough. He looked at me with those sunken eyes. "I don't know if Blackmoor is haunted," he said, "but I know we are." The door opened and I stepped outside. The air beyond the walls smelled like it was wet grass and road dirt and exhaust from a waiting car. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt followed. For years, I heard Blackmoor in ordinary places. Pipes knocking in cheap apartments. Keys at a janitor's belt. Rain tapping church windows. A woman humming in the grocery aisle. Sometimes I would hear Pike from a drain. Sometimes Baptiste would stand at the end of a hallway in a dream and say nothing at all. People want redemption to be clean, but it's not. It's work with dirty hands. I didn't leave Blackmoor good. I left it honest enough to know I'd been evil. That's not the same thing, but it's a start. Do I believe Blackmoor was haunted? You want the truth? I don't know. Some nights I believe every guard I saw was dead. Some nights I believe they were all so starved for light and sleep and mercy that our minds made monsters out of stone. Some nights I believe there's no difference. Blackmoor did not forgive me. I was taught what forgiveness would cost. And if that sounds like mercy to you, then you weren't listening. Because mercy is not being spared. Mercy is living long enough to understand why you should not have been. Reverend Marcus Elijah Kane passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 81. He was remembered by his congregation as a patient counselor and a devoted prison chaplain at Blackmoor Penitentiary, and a tireless advocate for men returning home after incarceration. For more than 30 years, Reverend Kane had taught that no man was beyond redemption, but the closest to him said he never used that word lightly. Former inmates remember him sitting with men no one else wanted to sit with, men facing life or execution, men who had hurt people beyond repair. He never promised them innocence, but he never made the sin sound small. He is survived by his daughter and 2 grandchildren, and the many men who credited him with helping them find their life after prison. The obituary made no mention of Darnell Pike. It made no mention of Leon Baptiste. But after the funeral, folded inside Reverend Kane's Bible, beneath the page where Kane asks if he's his brother keeper, his family found an old prison release form. The paper had gone soft with age, and the ink had folded everywhere except the stamp at the bottom, where it read, Blackmoor Penitentiary, time served. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. Sleep tight, or don't. From dusk till dawn.